Hey YouTube, Kiratwick here, bringing you all an update to my Amorphage Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile for August 2025. Been a few years since I last updated the Amorphage deck. For those of you that don't know, this is a pendulum deck that focuses on restricting what your opponent can do with different cards and different, aspects of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game when you control your Amorphage pendulum scales, and then having more of the special summon restriction with some of our bigger Amorphage monsters like Amorphage Sloth to be able to once again just restrict the gameplay of what your opponent can do with their deck. So as always, this is one of those decks that hasn't had support for a good while, but always like to update what is available for the decks to be used, and who knows, we might even have some more Amorphage support released later on in the future as well. But until then, let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So we'll go ahead and start off with the main deck monsters. For our Amorphage monsters, we're running 2 copies of Amorphage Sloth. This could honestly be a 3 of. If you wanted to run 3 copies of Sloth, you could just drop down the 3 of copy count for the next Amorphage monster that we're running to 2 and put a 3rd copy of Sloth into the deck. With the pendulum scale, while you control an Amorphage monster, neither player can add cards from their deck to the hand except by drawing them. Once per turn during your standby phase, tribute 1 monster or destroy this card, which is a card effect that goes with all of the Amorphage monsters. You have to have those monsters to tribute, which you can use the pendulum summon monsters just to give you a monster onto the field, but then you'll destroy your scale otherwise if you don't. And the monster effect of this card is neither player can special summon monsters from the extra deck except for Amorphage monsters. So a real restriction for your opponent's cards not being able to summon from the extra deck just gives them a limit to what they can do while this monster is on the field, but still giving you the option to pendulum summon out your Amorphage monsters. 3 copies of Amorphage Goliath. This is the one I mentioned that can be dropped down to 2 if you wanted to run 3 copies of Sloth, with this card being a level 8 monster. It's one that you have to tribute summon out, just like Sloth, since the pendulum scales for the Amorphage monsters go from 3 to 5, so you can summon out your lower level monsters while then relying on the tributes of those monsters to summon out the bigger ones. With the pendulum scale of Goliath, while you control another Amorphage monster, any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. So you have basically a macrocosmos skill, and then with this card, except for Amorphage cards, and once per turn during your standby phase, tribute 1 monster or destroy this card. So the destruction effect, but still graveyard restriction with Goliath, and then the same special summon restriction with this card being a monster on the field, with neither playing being able to special summon from the extra deck except for Amorphage monsters. We're also running 3 copies of Amorphage Lechery. While you control an Amorphage monster, neither player can, with this card, activate spells or their effects except for Amorphage cards. Once per turn during your standby phase, tribute 1 monster or destroy this card. So this all comes down to just knowing what you want to restrict with your opponent while you control the Amorphage monster with the other ones on the field. And if this card's pendulum summon or flip face up, neither player can special summon monsters from the extra deck while this card's face up except for Amorphage monsters. So while this card is a level 2 monster, it's a little more difficult to pendulum summon in this deck. You're going to use it mostly for the added spell restriction with its pendulum scale set up to do so. And 3 copies of Amorphage Envy. While you control an Amorphage monster, neither player can activate card or effects as Chain Link 2 or higher. And once per turn, during your standby phase, tribute 1 monster or destroy this card. So very vital for just restricting the Chain Link option of 2 or higher. So with that, your opponent can't respond to a good variety of cards you may activate, because that would be the Chain Link 2 in the play. And if this card's pendulum summon or flip face up, neither player can special summon from the extra deck while this card's face up, except for Amorphage monsters, having the same restriction for special summoning with the other ones that we'll mention from here on out. And then with the added play with those other monsters depending on their pendulum scale, with the next one being Amorphage Pride. We're running 2 copies of this monster. While you control an Amorphage monster, neither player takes any effect damage, and once per turn during your standby phase, tribute 1 monster or destroy this card. It's a 2F count just because effect damage is, limited to when you would want to restrict that play of your opponents. So 2 Pride for this play, and then the same special summon restriction when it's pendulum summoned or flip face up. The 2 copies of Amorphage Wrath. While you control an Amorphage monster, neither player can tribute monsters, which once again is selective on the response against your opponent, so just another 2F count, with the same pendulum summon or flip face up restriction of special summoning for your opponents while it's face up on the field. And also the 1 copy of Amorphage Greed, with this one being able to restrict trap activation, so just a 1F count. If you wanted to up the number of Greed we run on the deck, you can move around the number of Pride and Wrath for more copies of Greed to do so. with our ritual monster in the deck for the Amorphage lineup is Amorphactor, Pain, the Imagination, Dracoverlord. You can ritual summon this card with Amorphous Persona. If this card is ritual summoned, skip the main phase 1 of your opponent's next turn. Negate the effects of Fusion, Synchro, Xyz while they are on the field. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can add one Dracoverlord monster from your deck to your hand, except for Amorphactor, Pain, the Imaginative Dracoverlord. But this is more or less just another restriction card with the deck to be able to go into. And then the Ritual card that can summon it out being a field spell on top of all things as well, with more of the Pendulum engine in the deck being one copy of our Astrograph Sorcerer, and then the 3 copies of our Luster Pendulum, with the destruction effect of Luster Pendulum being able to then set up another Pendulum Scale and give us a monster to Pendulum summon out from the extra deck, and then being able to search a card when it's destroyed for the Astrograph Sorcerer, which then they will destroy themselves, and we can activate that card effect when we can't require the tribute for the Amorphage monster in the Pendulum Scale. With our last of our monsters just being a small hand trap lineup of 3 Ash Blossom and Joy Spring, you want to have as many cards as you can rely on for the Pendulum Summon, and once again restricting your opponent for being able to add cards from their deck to the hand with cards like Sloth take away the need for Ash Blossom and Joy Spring to have this hand trap anyway. And then for the spells, 3 copies of Amorphage Infection. All Amorphage monsters on the field gain 1 attack and defense for each Amorphage card on the field. If a monster or monsters in your hand or you control is tributed or destroyed by battle or card effect, you can add 1 Amorphage card from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect of Infection once per turn, so it's more or less a recovery option, continuous spell, to then be able to add more monsters when we tribute the ones or the destroy power for those cards to our hand, so we never run out of the Amorphage monsters that we need to use for the plays. Being a Pendulum deck, we're also running 2 copies of Pot of Riches. You shuffle 3 Pendulum monsters into the deck from your graveyard and or face up on your extra deck, then draw 2 cards. You can activate 1 Pot of Riches per turn, and you cannot special summon the turn you activate this except for Pendulum monsters. Once again, not a real restriction aside from the Ritual play, which is a smaller play to run in the deck anyway. But recycle power, if we do use our Amorphage monsters as, let's say, Xyz plays, for depending on what we want to summon out, then we can shuffle them back from the graveyard as well. The 1 Amorphous Persona, this is the field spell that can ritual summon out our Dracover as well. All Amorphage monsters on the field gain 300 attack and defense up to twice per turn. If an Amorphage monster you control is tributed, draw 1 card. You can banish this card from your graveyard, tribute Pendulum monsters from your hand or field whose total levels equal exactly 8. Then ritual summon 1 Amorphage Pain, the Imaginative Dracoverlord, from your hand. So this will get out the ritual monster, and then the added draw power for our Amorphage monsters also. Terraforming to search out the field spell, along with the 1 Call by the Grave, the 1 Ignite Reload, which could be a second Amorphous Persona if you wish to take this card out for this spot, the 1 Triple Tactics Talent, and the 1 Pot of Prosperity for the rest of the spell lineup in the deck also. With our traps being 2 copies of Amorphage Lysis. All monsters on the field except Amorphage monsters lose 100 attack and defense for each Amorphage card on the field. And if the card in your Pendulum Zone is destroyed except during the damage step, you can place 1 Amorphage Pendulum monster from your deck in your Pendulum Zone. So this will just give you access to other Amorphage cards depending on the play you want to go for when one is destroyed. And then the attack lowering while our Amorphage spell raises the attack of our own monsters. And then to go along with the smaller hand trap lineup, just 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. Just once again, along with Ash Blossom, a small hand trap lineup to rely on when we're not restricted to traps or to the additional monster effects aside from the Amorphage cards. For the extra deck, there's no Amorphage extra deck monster, but there's always a chance we may get one in the future. The 1 Beyond the Pendulum, along with the 1 Heretic Seal of Heavenly Spheres, because our Amorphage monsters are dragon monsters, which we can use for the link plays also. 1 Dynamondo for the ritual setup, along with the 1 SP Little Knight and the 1 IP Masquerena and the 1 Nightmare Cerberus, with some of the bigger links in the deck being the 1 Zephyr Metaltron, the 1 Nightmare Unicorn, and the 1 Borrelsword Dragon, with our Xyz monsters being the 1 Magister Paladin, the 1 Tornado Dragon, the 1 Exciton Knight, and the 1 Superstar Slayer, Typhon Sky Crisis. And then the Synchro and Fusion options just being the ones that can work with our Luster Pendulum, being the 1 Dracos Dinoster Power and the 1 Ignister Prominence for Synchro plays, and Fusion added protection power for our cards as well. And then as for some of the go-to plays in the deck, this is a big control deck, so you need to know what pendulum scales you want set up to combat against your opponent. So when you have that additional pendulum scale, you can have that one card and then just the one additional monster on the field as well. But the big play obviously will fall to your pendulum summon. So if you have the 3 different Amorphage cards to rely on, you could set up your scale with the 1 scale 5, the 1 scale 3, go for the pendulum summon, and then you have the special summon restriction from the extra deck for neither player except for Amorphage monsters while this card is set up. And then depending on the other pendulum scales, you control the Amorphage monster and the additional scales. So what this setup that I show you here, you set up the spell restriction and the effect damage for your opponent and yourself using this card. Then it just comes down to you building up more of your Amorphage cards as well for the play you want to go for. So then from there, if your opponent gets over this monster, you can just pendulum summon it back. Then the following turn, if you get another Amorphage monster, use it for the tribute play to get out your bigger monster, which will also just restrict more of the special summoning for your opponent just with a 1 tributed monster effect to do so. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed. Like I said, I can't believe it's been a couple years since the last update to this deck, but definitely an overlooked pendulum deck that I recommend if you're big on the control playstyle for the Yu-Gi-Oh series. And as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.